This is a walkthrough of my modular synth setup. I've had it for about a year now, and this is what I've built it up to. It's quite a small system, but I use it mostly for adding sort of subtractive synth, bass lines to songs I'm making, sampling it for weird drum noises, things like that. So for doing that, it's quite a cool little system. I'll start off by just running through what each of the modules does. I'll do them in the order that I bought them. And then I'll also mention the stuff that I use with it, the sort of external stuff, and then maybe put a patch together at the end. So the first module I got was Dreadbox Omicron. I was keen to do DIY stuff, but I just wanted to get an oscillator that just worked, and I'd saved up a bit of money, so I went with this. I got it second hand. I waited around for a while and got quite a good deal on it. It's basically 2 analog VCOs with all the standard outputs, pulse width modulation, 2 CV inputs per VCO, coarse and fine tune. You can sync the second one to the first one, B to A. It's also got this section, which is a square wave sub-octave generator. And you can actually plug in guitar's external signals into this because it's got an amplifier built in, or you can just put one of the oscillators through it and get a sub-octave. It'll put out a gate, which you can choose the sensitivity with this, and then it's got a mix between the clean and the sub. So it's sort of does some of the stuff that a dope for A119 does, but it has the advantage of the sub-oscillator as well, which is cool. The next one I got was the Turing Machine. Someone gave this to me. It was a bit broken. The switches were in the wrong way around, and so was the LED. I never fixed the LED, but I fixed the switches. It was also missing a few chips, which I put in, and it works fine. You feed it a clock. It puts out random voltages at the speed of the clock. It's got a noise output and CV controllable scale, which is the sort of range of voltages that it might put out. I don't mess with the length too much because I forget which length's which, but some of them are longer than others. That's about as much as I remember. It'll be completely random in the middle, and you can lock sequences, so it'll then repeat that sequence, which is quite cool because then it stops sounding quite as random. The next module I got is actually over here. Again, I got this broken second hand, but these break all the time and they're really easy to fix. You just swap out the chips inside them. I think from what I read, pretty much any of them can break, but buying a few new sets of chips was like a tenner, and I've got spares now, and I changed them, and it works. So it's just got audio in, input level, 2 CVs, one of them's attenuatable, cut off, resonance, and then it's got a band pass out and either a low or a high pass out. You can mix between, and in the middle it's sort of like a notch filter type thing. The next one was this, the Frequency Central loop-in envelope generator. This I bought the panel and the PCB off the Frequency Central website, then sourced the parts separately online and built it myself. I've got a video on it, you can look in my channel. It's just a standard ADSR, but you can set it up as an ADSR or you can loop it. You can see it looping on the LED there, or gated loop, so it'll loop only when a gate's plugged in. So they're all useful. Linear and exponential shapes, CV control over the time, which is the overall, you can stretch or shrink the entire ADSR shape, useful for looping or for just quickly changing everything without having to mess with it too much. Gate input, and then it's got normal, inverted and bipolar outputs, so positive, negative, and then alternating between the two. The next module is actually one that I designed and built myself. So I'm making these under Serial Instruments. It's called a mesh. I'm selling these online, and there's a full demo video on the Serial Instruments YouTube channel, which I'll put a link to if you're interested. I'll also put a link to the Reverb page if anyone's interested in buying one or buying a kit. It's basically, I needed some passive attenuators, some passive mults, a couple of mixers, and I realised using the sort of normal switched pins on the jack sockets, I could put all of these in one module, save a lot of space and cabling. So I made one for myself. I bought a few more PCBs than I needed, and I've started selling them. Basically, you've got input 1, output 1, and knob 1 here, and 1 to 6, and each of them is just a passive attenuator. But the cool thing is, if you plug into one of each row, but don't plug into the other two, it's actually normal to the other two. So I could plug something into one and take outputs from 1, 2 and 3, send it to 3 different places. Each of them is attenuatable. Same with the bottom row, 4, 5 and 6. Also, each column is normaled as a mixer. So if I plug into 1 and 4 and only take an output from 4, I'll get a mix of 1 and 4 out of the 4th output. Because it's a passive mixer, it works slightly differently to a powered mixer. Some people prefer a powered mixer. The main difference is a powered mixer will give you the sum of what you put into it. This will give you the average. So if I put 2 volts into 1 and 4 volts into 4, a normal mixer would give you 6 volts. This would give you 3. It would give you the average between the two, the middle between 2 and 4 rather than 6, which is the sum of them. So what you could do is plug, say, an LFO into the first input, sample and hold into the fourth input, and then you've got 3 submixes to send to different places. So it's getting a lot of use out of 2 modulation sources. Finally, the most recent one I got is this, which is Immutable Instruments Warps clone. What it does is basically you plug 2 signals in, and each of them has a VCA. For some reason on this, the second VCA doesn't work, but I don't use that too much, so it's not a massive problem for me. And then it'll do various things comparing the two. So you've got a crossfader. The timbre knob will do something for each mode. So crossfader, for example, it just blends between the two. It's got a few ring mods, weird sort of filtery things that it does. It's got vocoders. I can't remember what that one is. Sounds like a filter, I think. You can read up online about what they'll do. This actually has, I think it's called the Parasites Firmware, where if you press and hold this button and twist through, it's got bonus modes. You see the flashing lights, and it does a load of extra stuff like tape stops and cool things like that. But I just have it in the standard mode most of the time. But I'm going to mess with some of the others at some point. And you've got CV control over both knobs. I've also got this sort of sticker blind panel. You get these stickers from Thonk. They're really cheap. For sequencing, I'm using an Arturia Beat Step, just the standard one. It's got 16 steps and 16 memory banks. And it's got a bit of control with like forwards, random, reverse, the sequence, and you can change the speed of it quickly and transpose it quickly. I've got a cheap external mixer, just a little one, which I've found fine. And then I've got a Roland TR-08, which I use to add drums to some of the stuff. That's also got a trigger out if I want to clock all of this as well. I probably won't use that today, but I'll do a video on that at some point as well. So I'll just set up a normal subtractive synth patch and then maybe mess with it with the warps as well, just to show you some of the stuff it can do. I'll plug the CV out of the beat step into the CV in on the VCO. The gate out I'll plug into the ADSR, just check that's working. Yeah. And then I'll take the output. I'll take it from the warps. I'm not going to actually use the warps at the moment, but just so I can use the VCA on the first channel. So if I send sawtooth through the sub-octave generator and then send that into the filter and then send the filter to the input on the warps. If I just higher this up, you should be able to hear it. You can hear as well with these VCAs, they actually distort. So if I just plug that in and higher it up, so I'll then take the normal output of the gate, send that into the mesh, and then I can send one output of that to control the VCA here. And then I'll take another output and send that to control the cutoff. So just a fairly standard subtractive synth patch. If I want to blend in the sub-octave, I've got that over here, which I will, because it just sounds better. Like I said, the main thing I use it for is just as a synth like this. I might get a Arturia key step at some point so that I can play it more like a keyboard, but I'm fine with the beat step for now. The other main thing I do is set up a sort of weird FM drum patch, which I might show in another video. But for now, I'll just show you some of the other stuff I can do with this system based on this patch. So if I clock the Turing Machine with my second oscillator, set as a sort of LFO, and then I take the bottom outputs from the mesh, so I'm getting the mix instead, and then send the output of that into input 4, so I'm getting submixes sent to the VCA and to the filter. So I'll send just the envelope to the VCA, then to the filter I can send in this sample and hold. And you can hear this is looped at the moment. If I unlock it, it'll stop being looped and it'll be truly random. So that's quite a cool sound. If I instead plug into the second input on this, I can use the internal oscillator, which I'll just hire up and you should hear now. So it's got that internal oscillator, which means you don't have to plug anything else in and you can mess with some of these other modes. So they're quite extreme, but I'll show you some of the other modes here. Like I said, the VCA doesn't work, so there's no real point in plugging this into the level here. So yeah, I'll just show you what that sounds like. You can hear some of them are more subtle, some of the ring mods just sort of add a bit of distortion and some octaves and stuff, some of them are really messy, like that first one. But I'll keep going through the algorithms and messing with the timbre knob. I should mention, when you have the internal oscillator on, this is the pitch of the internal oscillator instead of the level, so that's why it sounds so weird when I mess with it. So now it's cool. If I switch to a sequence, I can then sequence this. And I could then use what I was using to modulate the volume, to modulate the pitch of the internal oscillator, which will do some really weird things on some of the modes. So that's what it's actually doing, but you can ring mod that and it makes some really crazy sounds. And if you wanted, you could send a third submix into something like the timbre and send some of the sample and hold to the timbre as well. See what that sounds like. So yeah, that's how I can get some of the weirder sounds. I haven't explored some of these sort of other modes that they have in here. So this is one I really do want to mess with. It's like a tape stop thing. So you can hear it with this.